Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Saili Kale. In this particular video, we'll be analyzing DC3. I will be giving my analysis of the quant section. Maruti will give his analysis of the verbal and the LRDI section. So in this particular video, I'll just cover what I felt about the quant section. If you have not already seen, we both did a blind attempt of DC3. So I attempted DILR and quant and he attempted verbal section. So please do check out the attempt first. Make sure that you have given the DC3, then see the live attempt and then check out the analysis also. See, basically what I felt while taking DC3 quant was that it was much harder than the actual CAT quant was in 2021, especially since DC2 was on the easier side. So especially if you consider that if this is CAT level, DC2 was slightly below CAT level over here somewhere, and this DC3 is slightly much above CAT. So essentially if you were par for, say, if you solved in the CAT 2021, if you solved somewhere between 15 to 17 questions, in DC2 you would have solved around 20 questions or 18 to 20 questions. Over here you would have solved lesser than that. You would have solved correctly probably 10 to 12 questions correctly over here. So if you consider that, this is definitely slightly below your expectations. You would have performed below your expectations, and some people might be slightly disappointed, but this is an important exercise to have. Every few DashCATs that you have a slightly tougher section thrown at you so that you are adapted to difficult sections, especially difficult quant sections and difficult DILR sections. The reason why that is the case is because sometimes whenever you are kind of pushed to the edge of what you can do, sometimes you are able to rise up to the challenge, and sometimes when things are not going as per your expectations, a lot of students just shut down. So one of the things that we didn't want to happen is that we didn't want it to be very easy throughout, exactly CAT level throughout, and then suddenly if the CAT is more difficult than expected, you will not be able to face that. So this is a slightly more difficult than CAT 2021. CAT 2020 was also, I think, okay. Some slots of CAT 2020 were actually as hard as this, I think slot 2 or something like that was as difficult as this. So essentially, whenever you get a slightly more difficult than usual CAT, it's important to know how to handle that. And here there are important lessons that you can take away from this particular quant section. The first thing that you have to remember is that, and this is something I tell often, is that to ace the quant section, you should try to ace the arithmetic section. And this is always true, but there are key exceptions to that. In the arithmetic section, sometimes there can be time traps, especially in this particular quant section. There were 4 arithmetic questions. They were much more harder than and time consuming than normal. Especially the very first question that is there in this particular section was a huge time trap. Whenever you see that there are time traps right up front, what you should do is try to go to the end and start from backwards. Sometimes when you start from the back of the section, you sometimes encounter easier questions, less time consuming questions. If you see, one of the easy hacks that you can do whenever you see that things are not going as per your liking is that you go and see the questions which are shorter. Shorter questions, by default, you'll either know how to solve them and be able to solve them quickly, or they'll be too time consuming and you can move on to the next question. Whenever you see that you're falling back on time, which happens quite a lot in these kind of difficult sections, try to go and find those questions so that you come back up on time and you don't feel the time pressure. There were many time traps that you should have absolutely avoided. At least you should not have done them upfront. You should not have done it at the very start, because as the time keeps ticking down, you feel more and more time pressure. The second thing I felt over here is that whenever you face a harder section, this is very important, is that when you face a difficult section, you should adjust your expectations. Remember that there isn't one score that you should target to clear CAT. If you score, say, 51 in quant, okay, in some years 51 might be required to clear CAT. 51 might be 99.99 percentile in some years. In some years 39 might be 99 percentile. In some years 36 might be 99 percentile. So depending on what your section is, how it looks, okay, adjust your expectations accordingly. If you feel that like in this particular section you should have realized like 3 or 4 questions in that questions are more difficult than normal, then you should immediately reduce your expectation. So your aim should no longer be to solve 22 questions, all 22 of them. You should aim to solve 15 questions. And what happens is that when you give yourself that width, right, that bandwidth that I'm going to only target solving 15 questions, you are essentially going to pick 7 questions to reject, 7 questions that you feel are not would be too time consuming, or you are likely to make a mistake. So once you start picking them, you would actually forego some questions which would end up wasting your time as such, and then you would actually come to the later part of the test where you would find good questions that you can easily solve. So always first thing that you should do when you see that a quant section is harder, it's more difficult than what you're used to, you should adjust your expectations. Do not try to say that no, I will try to solve all 22 of them. No, it's not needed. Remember that the goal is 99 percentile. The goal is not 51 or 63 or whatever that you have put in your mind. The goal is to get 99 percentile, and in the case of a difficult section, the score will also become lower. So you have to pick the right question. Then your job is not to solve every question, but to pick the right question. Search and find the easy questions. In many of these cases, what also happens is that you have come from the DILR section, you have thought for a lot of time, and you're kind of the front of the section is loaded with these difficult questions, and then your mind starts getting very fatigued and it stops thinking. So first thing that you should do in such kind of scenarios is take a break. Just stop for a second, stop and just take a small breather, and then just go through the section. Go through the entire section looking for questions which are on the easier side. Evaluate, is this an easy question? And then answer only the questions you immediately feel are easy. What happens is that you'll do the sweep of the section, you will get a breather, your brain will get the chance to adjust itself and absorb the pressure that it is feeling, time pressure that it is feeling. And you'll also be able to see certain questions which are on the easier side. Do not go by the questions that are at the front of the mock, because even in this particular section, there were plenty of questions at the end of the mock that were fairly easy. Particularly all PNC questions that were there in this particular section were very easy. You could have done them under 1 to 2 minutes max. So in all of these cases, what you should have actually focused on is all those questions that you should immediately pick in that search through. So whenever, this is the lesson that you should learn if you have had a tough time with this particular quant section in this mock. Remember, the first thing that you should do whenever you see a tough quant section is stop, take a breath and adjust your expectations. Your now goal is not to score 66 or 63 or anything of that sort. Your goal is to find the easy questions. Your goal is to solve all the easy questions. Your goal is to see the entirety of the quant section. Go through each of them. If it seems easy, attempt it. If it doesn't seem easy, if it seems time consuming, skip it. You will have like 2-3 times to go through the section to keep finding as such. Now you have to just find 15 questions and solve 15 questions. Once you adjust your expectations, you will do much better in tough sections. Remember, there are 2 things that are required to ace the quant section. One is the ability to solve quant questions. The other is the ability to handle the pressure and the disappointment also. Many times people are disappointed with the DILR section. Many times people are disappointed with how they started the section. All of that ends up kind of eating away with what you could have actually scored. If you even to now, if you go back and see the section individually, if you see the questions are not difficult. Some of them are time consuming, but there are some sitters also. If you see the algebra question, for example, it's an actual sitter. There are many easy questions in that particular section, but you would not have seen them when you were under time pressure. Under time pressure, it kind of changes your perception of how difficult the section is. So always remember, whenever you face a difficult section, take a moment, take a breath, and then instead of just solving blindly, go and see and find the easy questions. That is how you ace difficult sections. This is what you should take away from this particular quant section, which is definitely difficult. Okay. Now Maruti will cover the DILR section and the VA section.
Hi friends, my name is Maruti and I'm the co-founder of Cracku. In this video, I'll be analyzing DashCAT 3. Every mock has 3 sections: verbal, LRDI and Quant. When we are actually making the mock, when we are preparing the mock so that our students can take it, I work on the LRDI and Quant section and Saili works on the verbal section. But to give students an idea about how to actually attempt mocks, I take the verbal section as a mock because I haven't seen the questions of the verbal section, and Siley takes the LRDI and Quant section. So definitely do check out the mock attempt video also. It will be there on the same analysis page of DashCAT 3. With that being said, let us first dive into the DashCAT 3 analysis. First, we'll be looking at the verbal section. The verbal section has 4 RCs. Now, what I do whenever I am attempting a verbal section mock is first go through all the RCs, because picking the right order of RCs is very important. When your brain is fresh, you want to attempt the RC which you have a high chance of getting correct. So when I looked at this section, I looked at the first one. I thought it was a philosophical RC, so I didn't want to attempt it first. Then I looked at science and technology, bones and muscles. In different types of science and technology passages, there are certain ones which I am interested in. For example, if it is something with respect to astronomy or satellites or those kind of things, probably I'll be more interested in it. This was more biology specific, where I felt I would not be comfortable with it. Secondly, I could immediately see that the length of the RC was very long, so I didn't want to attempt it first. The third one that I looked at was about poverty and how different countries, especially the developed economies, are trying to deal with it. This I felt was a passage which was related to current affairs, whatever was happening in the world. So I felt this is the first one that I would want to attempt. So I tried to attempt this one first. Then I looked at the fourth one also. This was about London, and it was about a theatre which was being upgraded. So again, because I like London, I follow Arsenal, which is a London-based club, and I have some idea about London's social life. I felt this is the second one that I'm going to attempt. Now, what I did was a big mistake, because when I was actually going through the first RC about poverty and how the different countries were tackling it, for some reason I felt I was not able to concentrate on the passage. Some of the words that were used were very long words, which also made me lose my concentration and lose my focus. And if you don't start off well, that pressure is also there at the back of your mind that, okay, you have wasted 3 minutes or 4 minutes and you have just read one passage. Or if you browse through a passage and you don't remember, or you don't actually comprehend what was actually given, again there is stress that, okay, I have read an entire passage, but I'm not so sure I have actually grasped what is given. That feeling happened to me when I was actually attempting the poverty and how different countries were actually trying to combat it. But one of the things that I always do, which I recommend people to do, is when you are putting some time in a reading comprehension, don't leave it midway. You finish it, you attempt all the questions and then go to the next RC, because you won't have time to come back to it. In Quant, for example, one of the strategies that I use is when I look at a question, I try to attempt it, and after 30 seconds, if I'm not making any headway, or after a minute, if I'm not making any headway, I leave it and I go to the next question, because I feel that in Quant, I'll get time to come back to it. But in a reading comprehension, you don't invest 30 seconds or a minute. By the time you realize that this is a very difficult reading comprehension, you would have already invested 4 to 5 minutes. Now, once you have invested 4 to 5 minutes, you have to attempt those questions, or you should take a call that, okay, this is a reading comprehension which is very difficult, I'm not going to come back to it. You should never tell yourself that, okay, I'm going to come back to it later, because that is not going to happen in a reading comprehension. So at this point, I felt that I have some idea about what the passage was about, and I attempted some questions, but I didn't do a very good job. I don't think I got many questions correct in this passage. The next one I attempted was again the London Theatre, which was being upgraded, because again I felt I'm slightly familiar with London as a city and its history and its culture, so I felt it will be something that I'll be interested in. But again, for many reasons, because this was not about London or about culture or about theatre, this was more about one specific theatre which was being upgraded. So I don't want to go into the nitty-gritties, but the way I assessed the passage when I was first glancing through it at the start was a mistake, because of which I again got stuck here. But again, I followed whatever I just told you, where I felt that because I've invested 3-4 minutes, I don't want to come back to it later. I'll finish whatever I have started, and then I try to get the best marks that I could get. Surprisingly, the East versus West philosophy, which I thought would be something that was very difficult, was actually a very simple RC. It was an RC which I think I've done quite well, because I was able to understand the entire concept very easily. I think I got only one question wrong, which also was a silly mistake. The way I read one of the options was wrong. I actually interpreted it differently. But this was, in my opinion, the easiest RC. And this is something that students should definitely attempt, especially because there is concepts which are respect to Indian philosophy. It will be much easier for you to actually grasp it. It is not talking about some ancient Greek philosophy. Many of the aspects that are given in this passage are about Indian philosophy. And most of us actually have a lot of understanding of it, even on a subconscious level. So this I felt was the easy passage. I judged the science and technology to be a tough passage, and this I found to be the most difficult. This I left it towards the end because I felt that this was a very long passage and some of the words that were given were very technical and related to biology, where I felt I would not be making a lot of headway because I don't have a lot of understanding of how the human body really works, what is inside your body, how the bones and muscles combine with each other, what are the acids or chemicals that are released. All of these things I have absolutely no idea. So I didn't want to go into it, and this also felt like a very long passage. So I kept it towards the end. After attempting 3 passages, then I went to verbal. Normally, I do quite well in reading comprehension and I do poorly in verbal ability questions. But here, I think after the 3 passages, I figured out that I haven't done a good job. I realized that my RCs, I'm not going to score quite a lot. So I tried to tell myself to do better in verbal ability. That was one reason why I think I've scored slightly better in verbal ability as compared to usual. The second reason obviously is that I think it was slightly on the easier side, the verbal ability, especially as compared to DashCAT 1 and DashCAT 2. Another reason I think why I have done slightly better is because in the earlier DashCATs and even in the earlier CAT, when I come to verbal ability after doing 3 passages, I would have invested a lot of my brain in actually getting those RCs correct. Over here, I think 2 of the RCs were at least I found them so difficult that I was not able to invest a lot of my mind, because of which on a certain level my mind was slightly fresh when I came to verbal ability. And in the verbal ability, I think I've done quite well in para summaries. I think para summaries were actually quite easy this time, especially if you go through the options, because in para summaries what I try to do is I try to figure out what is the important things that are given in the passage, and then when I'm looking at the options, in most of the options either some additional information is given or in the wrong options, where you feel that okay, everything that is given in the option seems to be correct, but there will be subtle chances. For example, this is not related to DashCAT 3, but one of the things that quite often happens is if in the summary it is mentioned that most of the animals sleep at night. That is a line that is mentioned, and in the options everything seems to be correct, but instead of using most, it will be given that all the animals sleep at night. Now you should be clear and you should be attentive to realize that okay, it is not all, it is only most. So if you figure out that there is a slight change in the wordings and where additional emphasis is being given, you can rule that option out. That was something that I've done in this DashCAT, and I think I was able to do quite well in the para summaries because I was able to go with the options and I figured out that some of the options were easily wrong. With respect to para jumbles, again I felt it was not very difficult. Normally I don't do very well in para jumbles, but here in the 3 para jumbles, I think in 2 of the para jumbles I was immediately able to figure out what is the starting line and what is the ending line. And once you figure out what is the starting line and the ending line, getting those connections become easy. So this also I think I have done quite okay. In fact, I haven't done very well, but I think serious aspirants who are taking it with a lot of emphasis and focus will be able to do much better. Same with even odd one out. I think odd one out I got 1 correct and 1 wrong, but again it was not super difficult. One of the things that I do in odd one out, which I think I have mentioned earlier also, is that when there are 5 lines that are given, I don't try to form an entire paragraph. If I get it, then it is fantastic, but even otherwise, if I'm not able to make a lot of headway, what I try to say is if there is any obvious connection between 2 lines. So for example, if you are given line 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, I was not able to get the ordering correct, but if I figure out that okay, 3 will definitely come after 2. So 2 and 3, based on how the line 2 is ending and how the line 3 is beginning, sometimes you can figure out that lines 2 and 3 are connected. Once lines 2 and 3 are connected, in odd one out, you can ignore both of them. The answer has to be either 1 or 4 or 5. So using this, I was able to get one of the answers correct, but the second one I was not able to get correct. Anyway, as a summary, I feel the reading comprehensions in DashCAT 3 are definitely on the more difficult side, especially as compared to DashCATs 1 and 2. And the verbal ability I think was definitely on the easier side. And picking the right passage is of paramount importance. That is always important, but it is especially true in DashCAT 3 because one of the passages, the first one, I felt was quite easy. And in an easy passage, you should try to get all the 4 questions correct. Over here also, I made one mistake where I got one of the questions wrong, but this was definitely an easy passage. And if you have missed out on this passage, then you have to think about how you are actually picking the questions. A good score in verbal section, a fairly good score, I would say is 30 plus. This I think is an excellent score. Somebody who is looking to join the top IIMs, I think they should try to get 30 plus. But if you're able to get 20 plus, that is not a bad score. That is a fairly good score, and you should be you should not feel very worried. 20 plus in this mock is definitely not a bad score, especially because the reading comprehensions are very difficult. Let us now look at the LRDI section. The LRDI section of DashCAT 3 is definitely on the easier side. Let us look at all the 4 sets and then we'll analyze which of them are on the easier side and which of them should have been definitely attempted. The first set is one of selection of players. This I think was a fairly difficult set. To really get this set correct, you have to spend at least 15 to 20 minutes. And in fact, based on how the remaining 3 sets are actually there is sufficient time for you to actually answer them. Because some of the sets are very easy. For example, there is a 6-question set on bidding. It was a table which you have to fill in, and based on the information that is given, there are very few clues that are given, but you can actually use those clues to fill up the entire table and answer all the 6 questions. So this was a 6-question set which I would actually say is easy. It is not even medium, it is definitely on the easier side. This we have put in just to ensure that people don't get scared by looking at a 6-question set. The remaining 2 4-question sets, one of them again is a simple bar chart question. If you look at the graph well, then you should be able to answer these questions. In general, for bar charts, one of the things that I would recommend students to do is don't try to put the entire data into a table before it is necessary. You have to first look at the questions and you have to only extract the information that is really needed. Sometimes you'll have to actually put the entire information that is given in an entire bar chart into a table and then answer the questions, but that will consume time. So don't start off with it. Only do it if and when it is required. For example, if the sales was about only one particular year, or if out of the 4 questions, you can answer 2 or 3 questions without actually putting the entire data into the table, then get those 2 or 3 questions correct and then move on to the next one. And when you have time, you can come back and put the entire data into the table. These are things and these are judgment calls that you should actually make. In this particular question, there was not really any need for you to put the entire bar chart into the table. I think only in the 4th question that was needed. The first 3 questions you can answer it by looking at specific points in the bar chart. That also is something that you should really do. The next 4-question set was with respect to permutations and combinations. This was about how many codes are possible. This is a fairly standard question. These kind of questions can definitely be expected in CAT, which will involve some permutations and combinations and with respect to what codes are available, how many codes are present, those kind of things. This is medium for students who have some understanding of permutations and combinations. You don't need to do a lot of permutations and combinations, but some understanding of permutations and combinations is definitely needed for you to solve this set. This is another reason why I would recommend everyone who is preparing for CAT to not give up on permutations and combinations in Quant. Because even if you get only one question in Quant, it is possible that you will get one entire set in LRDI, and if you know permutations and combinations well, you need not be an expert, but if you are slightly comfortable with it, you will get an entire set correct. So somebody who is decently comfortable with permutations and combinations would get this entire set correct. Now these 3 in my opinion are fairly easy sets and sets that should be answered by somebody who is aiming for a very good score. Somebody who is aiming for say 99 plus should definitely try to attempt these 3 sets, but somebody who is looking to aim for say 85 plus or 80 plus should definitely get the bidding set correct and the smartphone sales question correct. So even if somebody is very scared of LRDI, they should try to get at least these 2 sets correct because they are not very difficult. If you are slightly confident of yourself, you will definitely get both of them correct. You should ensure that you are not making any mistakes. It is quite possible for you to make a mistake when you are reading the bar chart. If you avoid that, you will get the entire set correct. Similarly, while you are calculating the bidding, there are some slight tricks which can be maneuvered and which should be maneuvered. So overall, if you really ask me what is a good score, I would say, because this has 4 questions, this has 6 questions and this has 4 questions. So out of these 14 questions, somebody who is aiming to get a very good score in CAT should aim to get at least 10 questions correct. So they should be aiming for 30 plus score. A 30 plus score in this is a good score. Somebody who gets 40 plus again is quite 40 plus in LRDI normally is very difficult. But this mock, because the LRDI section is slightly on the easier side, somebody who is aiming for an extremely high score, something like say 99 plus, can aim to get 40 plus in LRDI.